welcome to Respections. I'm your host, Patrick Tomlinson. And today we'll bring you part two of our presentation on the history of the West India Regiment. The last time we introduced you to the regiment, we gave you a little bit of history of the regiment. We explained some of the campaigns that the regiment was involved in, and we discussed how the regiment got started in the southern United States during the American War of Revolution. It's very timely because we are recognizing the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. Condolences to the family. And we think this is very timely. So we encourage you to sit back, enjoy, and if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'll be happy to field them and to discuss them and to enlighten you on anything that you might be interested in or not sure of. So sit back, enjoy, and look forward to seeing you on further programs.
In the Somerset case, an American, his name was Stewart, uh, took a slave by the name of James Somerset, who I think was originally born in Jamaica and found himself somehow in North America, was taken by his master to Britain in somewhere around 1771, 1772. We have to remember that there are many men of color living in London and in major cities, especially those cities that surrounded. There were port cities like Liverpool, London, et cetera, Bristol. Many those those port cities that where you had numerous ships going back and forth between the Caribbean, North America, Africa, and so forth. So this individual, James Somerset, was encouraged, obviously, by colleagues to try to gain his freedom. So he ran away, and he was, I think, retaken by the master. And then a petition was placed before the Court of King's Bench that sought to gain his freedom. So a petition, habeas corpus petition, was submitted, and so a major case arose out of this. Ultimately, Chief Justice Lord, I think he was Chief Justice. I have to double check that. But Lord Mansfield, who was the justice sitting on the case, ruled that Somerset must be freed. So that had serious implications, because one of the things that Lord Mansfield stated was that slavery was not in harmony with English common law. And so that caused significant ripples, especially through America. And the British knew that they somehow, whether sooner or later, would have to contend with the whole issue of slavery. As we are aware, America had to put it off till 1865, when this question was resolved through the American Civil War. So the British promised any man that rallied to their standard to gain their freedom. So the Ethiopian Regiment was formed, and at the end of cessation of hostilities in 1786, many men remained, African Americans remained in the care of the British, especially New York and those areas that the British held. So the British had a dilemma as to what to do with these men. Now, it is estimated that anywhere from 12 to 17,000 men fought with the British. So a majority of them, the British took. Some of them, they decided to allow to go back or send them back to their masters, because there was a major negotiation between General Washington and Sir Henry Clinton. And there's a famous Phillipsburg proclamation that I think General Clinton made, or Henry Clinton, which is also a mirror image of what Lord Dunmore made, but it was a little bit more comprehensive and it was further down the line. So there were about two or three of these major proclamations by British generals who, being hard pressed for manpower, uh, um, reached out to Africans or African Americans to fight in their forces. So these forces were um, actually British fighting forces. They were um, paid, sometimes not as much as the British forces, but they were paid. Now, the Americans, most of those who fought on the side of the Americans were hard pressed, and most of them found themselves back in slavery. So they slaves in the American Revolution who fought had a decision to make whether to fight with the Americans or to fight with the British. And I think they made, based on the objective conditions, they perceived that the British were more genuine in their promises and obviously maybe how they were treated and so forth and so on. They decided to rally to the British standard. And it's not a well-known fact, but the majority of African Americans or blacks, as we might choose to use the term, fought on the side of the British because they perceive that they would ultimately gain their freedom, which is really at the heart and the soul of every human being. So they made a choice, which was a practical choice, and they fought to the British. So at the end of the cessation hostilities, the British evacuated quite a few of these men. It was estimated that it was anywhere from 3 to 4,000, and some of them were taken back to um, um, Britain with their forces, the British forces. Some were taken to Nova Scotia. Some were taken back to Africa, to Sierra Leone and to Liberia and so on, where the British had settlements. And quite a few were taken back to the Caribbean. And it's from these fighting blacks that the West India Regiment was derived. Now, on this slide, we see this is a history of the Second West India Regiment, which shows the various campaigns. This is a book written by Colonel Caulfield, who was one of the commanding officers of the Second West India Regiment. Now, before I go into this, I'd like to just state that there were actually 12 West India Regiments. There was the First West India Regiment, Second West India Regiment, Third West India Regiment, Fourth West India Regiment, Fifth West India Regiment, Sixth West India Regiment, Seventh West India Regiment, Eighth West India Regiment, Ninth West India Regiment, 10th West India Regiment, 11th West India Regiment, and the 12th West India Regiment. Now, of all these 12 West India regiments, only two records of these individual 12 West India regiments are in existence today. That of the First West India Regiment and the Second West India Regiment. The third through the 12th, all the records are because I believe in taking most of these records back to the UK or Britain for storage. The ship that was taking these records ran into a storm and the ship was lost, and all of these records were lost. So we only have records of two West India regiments, the First West India Regiment and the Second West India Regiment. What we're seeing here on the screen is a timeline of the Second West India Regiment. Now we see the actions of Bragg Creek and actions of Stono Ferry. These are the Colonel Caulfield started the history back in North America, where the regiments were actually not yet West India regiments, but were fighting men under British forces during the period of conflict between the British and the American colonists. So we see, for example, actually the Siege of Savannah. So all the regiments, or the president, or the progenitor to the West India regiments, especially the Second West India Regiment, was actually in Savannah. So where the British was had major conflict, these regiments participated. So we see the siege of Charlestown, which is at the Battle of Hobkirk's Hill. These are in the south of the Americas, North America, um, the southern state, Georgian, particularly South Carolina, where the regiment was actually fighting. Then we see the relief of the 96 and the Battle of Utah Springs. And then we see in 1781 the removal to the West Indies. So these men were taken back to the West Indies. And so in and around 1795, the regiments began to be raised. So the actual raising of the West India Regiment, which we see on the screens, the various West India Regiment, which I mentioned earlier. We have the first West India Regiment, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, all the way, and it shows the dates. And some of these names, you see, in 1795 we have the Whites Regiment, 1795, which is the first West India. Whites is the first way because it's named after the commanding officer. And the second West India Regiment is the Myers Regiment. Now, something to be noted, how were these regiments structured? The regiments were structured in essence. They were officered by Englishmen, and that was almost, it was not, it was almost like a law that no West Indian or no Black could raise or rise above the level of sergeant. And so anything above sergeant, warrant officers, ensigns, uh, lieutenants, etc., up to the colonel of the regiment was actually an Englishman. Um, and what we have to remember too is that we see British sort of social structure being um, imposed upon the West Indies because anybody who was not born or came from really a family of standing, as they would call it in England, would not be able to gain a commission. Most white English soldiers, um, put it this way, I wouldn't say most, but a significant amount of soldiers that read and write. And so it was for men of the Western Regiment. Our information, they thought the regiment would need to know. It was not like uh, in today's times when men were men were more literate and communication came in black and white. Any communications were read to the regiment itself. So we see here, for example, a typical some typical West India regiment soldiers. We see them in their uniforms. We see, for example, this soldier being a sergeant. We see a bugler. We see a rifleman. And this uniform, what they call the Zouave uniform, is still in existence today. I know it's worn by pretty much the same um, uniform with minor modifications is worn by the military band in Jamaica. So we have again what another version of the regiment. We see, for example, what might be in the background here, a guardhouse. We see a rifleman and we see an officer. It shows a white bugler. Now, something that should be noted is that the regiments were they weren't segregated regiments as happened in America. The only restriction is that um, the men could not amount could not attain the commission in the British Army. It was almost a written rule, but it was not codified as such. But it was standard practice. Now, when these regiments went to the West Indies, as we see here, one of the difficulties is that the colonial legislatures in all the British Islands and sorry, um, St. Lucia, um, Grenada, legislature, and uh, you had slavery in existence at the time. So for the slaves to see a man marching up and down, being paid and so on, and he's in the cane fields, it's going to cause a difficulty. It's going to cause dislocations in the social fabric of the nation. And so this is what began to happen. Um, the regiments were also um, persons or peopled, if I might use the term, by actual Africans who were bought on the slave blocks by agents representing the British Army. So I will stop there, and then in part two, I will go and look at some of the campaigns that the West India Regiment participated in and other um, bits of information that are pertinent. So stay tuned. Welcome again to the second part of our presentation on the West India Regiment. Last time we looked at the background of colonial forces. We looked at the British occupation or the British taking a presence in the Western Hemisphere by way of its expedition to Hispaniola and being defeated by the Spanish forces and ending up in Jamaica, taking Jamaica, establishing a beachhead and establishing major fortifications and having a significant presence. We looked at some of the legal implications that began to bubble up or to percolate up in the Chief Justice John Mansfield's decision, which some term a Emancipation Proclamation. And we looked at some of the proclamations, including Lord Dunmore's proclamation, which was issued all the way back in 1776, freeing any slave that would rally to the British standard. And we looked at General Sir Henry Clinton's Phillipsburg proclamation, which was similar to Lord Dunmore's proclamation, um, guaranteeing freedom to any Black or African that would rally to the British standard. Now, for personally, I prefer to use the term African rather than referring to skin color because I think it's more appropriate. So I'll use the term African, denoting people from Africa or from that continent to describe people who were held in bondage or taken from that particular location. So today we wanted to follow on and look at some of the campaigns of the British West India regiments. The last time we saw where the regiment was established, it was people, and now in these the various chapters in Colonel Caulfield's uh, uh, history of the Second West India Regiment, we see all these various expeditions that the regiment took part in. In chapter 7, we see Major General's White Regiment of Foot. Now, General White had actually, to raise a regiment, usually you had to have some money. You had to be able to pay the officers, pay the men, victual them properly, provide stores and ammunition and food and so on and so on. And what it was, in a sense, a business too, because whenever the regiment captured any or went on any campaign and anything was captured, um, there's what is called bounty, and this bounty would be shared principally among the officers, which got the lion's share, and a portion went to the enlisted men. So we saw, typically dressed men of color in their zouave uniforms. We see, typical, and so they were played in many drums, and there are documentation. There's much document playing in bands in Britain and other European forces. So we have again a typical soldier. Maybe this is a man of color. We see this is on the dock. And what we would like to say is that one of the major fortifications that was established in Jamaica, which was called the Jamaica Station, was Fort Augusta and Port Royal. Now, Port Royal was a major naval fort. It had massive amounts of naval stores and so on. So when ships were plying, because Jamaica was almost like an aircraft carrier with all in the midst of all these Spanish territories, major Spanish territory. You had Cuba to the northwest. You had Hispaniola. You had Puerto Rico. You had Central America. You had Mexico. You had Venezuela. So they were Jamaica. They were surrounded by all these hostile Francis territory, which was Haiti. So here, again, we see this is what I mentioned in the last presentation, which was Lord Dunmore's proclamation. It says, it's a proclamation. His Excellency, the Right Honorable John Earl Dunmore. His name was John Murray Earl Dunmore, Earl of Dunmore. And this is his proclamation, one of the earliest proclamations, or one of the earliest what they call Emancipation Proclamation, because it was limited. And this is Dunmore's offer to any African to rally to his standard in exchange for the freedom. Here we have a list of the various regiments. We have Nichols, which is the fourth West India Regiment, which was an interesting regiment. Here we see the 11th West India Regiment and the 12th West India Regiment. This was raised in 1798, but disbanded in 1803. Both of them, the 11th and the 12th, were raised in 1798. Now, what I would like to share is that the regiments, after the British evacuated their men back to the West Indies, especially men who the officers determined could be welded into a fighting force, they were spread across all the islands. So it was not Jamaica alone. Some were sent to Barbados, some were sent to St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Grenada, Dominica, British Virgin Islands, St. Kitts, Nevis, all these islands, British Islands, they placed regiments. If they didn't have a full regimental complement, they had one or two companies. And these companies would be housed in a battery or a fortification. So this is an aerial view of a fortification looking out at the sea. And this is where the regiment would normally be stationed. We see a side view of the fortification because usually ships had to make an amphibious landing, and so the regiment had to be close by in order to fight any of the invading forces. Uh, they would try to bombard from the air, especially if the Spanish was making an effort or the French was making an effort. And then they would send the forces on land by small boats to assault these fortifications. We see another important fortification. This one will play an important part later on in the defense of Haiti. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about Haiti because Haiti is a very, very interesting and unique case. And one of the things that make Haiti unique is that it was the only territory that where men of color, Africans, overthrew an European power, major military European power at the time. Now, little credence is given to the Haitians, a little acknowledgement for the part Haitians played in the American Revolution, because a lot of Haitians were, especially the leaders who went back and participated in the Haitian Revolution, they also fought on the side of the French against the Americans during the American Revolution. And so they were significantly responsible for America gaining their independence. And little is said or acknowledged of that. Now, the Haitian Revolution took place in 1793, and we have to remember that um, it was not just the British, through altruism, um, deciding to end slavery. Slavery became a difficult prospect for them to maintain, and these Africans actually fought for their slavery, fought to break the chains of slavery. Sorry.
Thank you again for tuning in and sharing with us on the history of the West India Regiment. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. It was a little bit choppy at times, but we tried to present you with a little bit of fascinating history. We paid tribute to the several men and women throughout the colonial period who fought in and placed their lives, their families, their um, resources uh, to gain a better life. So, once again, we thank you for tuning in and we look forward to you joining us in further programming. I'm your host, Patrick Donaldson. Stay safe and be well.